Barlog, director of God of War, and if you have not played God of War, spoilers abound. Go away. Come back after you finish playing, and then I'll give you a little insight on how we made the game. Alright, so here we are at the start of God of War. This opening sequence actually came about a little late. We knew the opening level, but the opening sequence of Kratos at the tree and kind of having the quiet, solemn moment was a lot of discussion for us to figure out, you know, the right moment to start this game. And it needed to be not a big, bombastic action moment to really show people that things are different. We needed to show them that, you know, Kratos has a little bit more going on in this game than any of the previous games. It was important that you actually use the button to chop the tree down. Another thing, you know, spoilers, the chopping of this tree down is Kratos' wife, Faye. She had selected these trees, and these trees are very specific in the stave, the magical stave that is protecting their forest. She knew cutting this tree down would make them exposed to the entire Norse pantheon, to everyone on the outer world, and that was her way of saying that, you know, Kratos sometimes likes to procrastinate, and given the opportunity, he's going to just stall as much as possible. And he's unaware of this, which is why he even tells his son, you know, you're not ready. This moment, like, this is really cool. I really wanted more of these kinds of moments throughout the game. The theme of the wounds that will not heal. So these burn marks on his forearms have not healed since they were seared on his forearms all the way back in the first God of War game. And now he's even unable to
Get in the boat,
show
boy.
his son just the wrapping of that, which is, you know, wordlessly explaining so much of this relationship between these two characters. And I said this before, but I mean, this is such a blatant inspiration from Commando. You know, that when I was a kid watching that movie and seeing Arnold carry this giant tree, and the first tree that they gave me was really small and normal size, you know, and I kept saying bigger and bigger and bigger, and I wanted to go even bigger than this, but at that point I think they cut me off and kicked me out of the office and said, we're just not going to listen to you anymore.
Still want me to tie it to the boat?
But I wanted it to feel like, you know, there's Arnold carrying a tree, but then there's, you know, Kratos carrying just massive tree. And, of course, his son completely unfazed, right? Because he doesn't know anything more than just dad is dad, right? He's always been strong. No big deal.
Boy.
I like the slowness of all of this, just kind of
That is enough.
doing very everyday things, chopping a tree down, lashing it to a boat, you know, going down the river, but still giving you those sort of quiet, softer moments that help build towards what this eventually will
Father?
become.
What?
Did something change? The forest feels different now.
Everything is different, boy.
And this line,
Time to dwell on it.
Yes, sir.
so much weight behind this line. This is like that line at the beginning of Iron Man 2 when Don Cheadle is War Machine, and he pretty much just says, what are you doing here? I'm here to deal with it. Let's move on. That line is all about that sense that everything has changed. It's a communication to Atreus as much as it is to the audience. Everything's different. Try not to dwell on it. Take in the experience. Roll with us on this ride. Danielle Bisutti. Oh, so brilliant as the Witch in the Woods, or Freya. Spoilers. And here, very important that this is the moment of quiet. There is no music. It is the sounds of their feet crunching against the leaves as they walk up in silence, right? This is, neither of them really knows how to relate to each other. This is the slightly uncomfortable silent moments as you're slowly beginning to understand that something else is going on. And if you've never played before, you still are wondering, like, okay, so what is happening? If you've not experienced any spoilers from the internet, it is a surprise when you first see Atreus walk through the door and see what really is going on.
That was the last.
Then he just goes and tears this tree up. In a few minutes, the whole thing is broken down. See? Gods can chop wood fast. Oh, I love this little breath. Just stealing himself before he walks in. And so much of, what we had done is being open on the set to try to figure out what works best. And this sort of abbreviation of the Viking prayer for the dead was added on the set when I was just like, I don't really want him to do the whole poem because we're taking place in the time before the Vikings. So I'm imagining this is kind of the Strawhenge to the Stonehenge version of that full poem. And really all he's doing is calling out to his mother and his father as she's being ushered off. He's laying down mistletoe.
Whither do they call to me? Whither do they call to me? Whither do they call to me?
We had a bug for the longest time where in the middle of this sequence, the model would just jitter a little bit, so everybody would be like, she's not dead.
She's ready.
This part coming up is so beautiful. Ivor's music is just astounding. I mean, Bear did an amazing job on this score. This moment, the first time he gave me the first draft of the score, and we put it to the rough animatic of this, Kratos' sort of true desires right here.
Find your way home.
You're free.
You are free.
That's all he wants. Like, she got what he could never get. It's interesting because we didn't do a lot of modifications on this. Once we had done our pre-visualization of this scene, it ended up being almost exactly as we first realized it. The only changes were getting the camera to work really well over the fires. That was the big trick. Like, orchestrating all the complex camera moves with these big objects all over the set was definitely one of our biggest challenges. And then also not feeling like you're getting dizzy from moving the camera back and forth and back and forth. The initial previs we did was a lot longer, and we kind of, before we got on the set, started cutting it down. It was definitely a part of me that felt like maybe this was a little too fast, but I think it ended up working overall for the pacing. But I really wanted the fires to burn for a little bit longer, the knife could heat up, and then he grabs it, but I think it still works. I love this.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. He apologizes for getting burned. And then there's just
Squeeze.
simple, put the snow in his hand. And a piece of Kratos.
This knife.
At the beginning of this journey, a piece of his father,
Hers.
a piece of the memories, the wounds that never heal are on his hand. He's carrying that throughout. And a piece of his father and a piece of his mother.
Что делать?
She knew.
Show me.
Now?
Oh, I love his reaction there. It's just such an amazing work by our cinematics team to be able to really catch so many of these moments. A lot of weird choreography had to go on, but
What are we hunting?
so
You
worth
are
it.
hunting deer.
And the lighting here is just absolutely beautiful.
Which way?
It did not come
In the
online until
direction
the
of
very
deer.
end. The artist actually came in
Okay.
to this level and told me,
this
oh, I'd
way.
like to redo a few things. We're in the last 6 months of the game. And I thought, oh, okay, cool, we'll redo a couple of rocks or change some textures or even adjust the lighting a little bit. And then a producer runs in my office like 3 or 4
Father,
weeks later, yelling at me.
why are we doing this
Why
now?
did you tell them to redo the
need
whole
to know
level?
you
And I
can
was like,
survive the
what are
journey.
you talking about?
Then
And
we
they
leave for the mountain?
they weren't satisfied
Depends
with
on
it, so
you.
they went in and they really just
Hunt.
redid everything. And it's for the better. That's the level of kind of perfectionism that everybody has at the studio, that a level that was done, that I was like pretty happy with, and I gave them, thumbs up and said, this is good, let's move forward. and they just were not
What
happy.
did you find?
They wanted to take
Tracks.
it even further, and
Not deer, though.
I feel like that's reflected in every
keep
aspect of the game. Everybody's desire to go one step beyond what we think is like, okay, well, that's done. So here we are getting ready for the stranger fight, the big opening for the new God of War. I love the sequence that brings us
You
in.
lost control.
You know, this
That thing was trying to kill us.
lesson from Kratos, this idea that,
Anger
yes,
can be a
I'm
weapon
terrible at controlling my anger, but
If you control it,
I
use
need you
it.
to do as I say,
You
not as I
clearly
do.
cannot. When you
I haven't been sick in a long time.
There's this moment in Tree of Life where Brad Pitt is teaching his kids how to throw a punch, which kind of is born, this moment is born of that idea
Come on,
of
then.
something.
Keep
So
on hitting.
Kratos getting
I
down
want
on
you to try.
Atreus' level. Atreus being fairly disinterested and getting engaged further and further as
Ow!
Kratos continues to try to antagonize him. And this really is to illustrate
Slow.
how crap of a father he is in the beginning,
Cut it out.
right?
Weak.
Like he is
Again.
trying
Again.
to give him a good lesson, but he's just really not that great at it.
Your anger
And this was another
can get lost.
sequence where the lighting did not come online until very late, and I was worried. I knew that the lighting group was going to make something amazing, but it's really scary as you get into release year, only a few months off, and we're still waiting in the queue for the lighting on this, which is such an important sequence.
Come on out!
The stranger arrives.
No use hiding anymore.
This was a hard character to cast.
What's going on?
We took a long time
More
trying to find
importantly, I
the right
know
person
what
for this.
you are.
And I was looking everywhere, high and low, to find somebody that was going to come in and really make a
Who is that?
choice, you know. And
I do not know.
I was using the example in a lot of the auditions with everybody of saying, you know, I want something similar to the choice that
Tell me
Benicio
what
del
I
Toro
want to
made
know.
in Usual Suspects.
Don't need to
That he came in and he said,
bloody-
I'm going to play this character, you know, that nobody can understand what he's saying. He speaks really fast, his accent's super thick, and you know, he's got a little bit of a slowness to him, and then, you know, just everyone struggles with trying to understand him. But I didn't want them to mimic, you know, Benicio. I wanted them to come up with something interesting. And Jeremy, you know, I had a phone call with him early on, and he kind of
What do you want?
just gave me a bunch of ideas of what he was thinking immediately, and I knew right away. I was like, this is it. This is the right guy.
Whatever it is you seek, I do not have.
I
it.
can't believe he's taking my phone calls.
You should move on.
He is an incredible, incredible human. And what he
Yeah,
brought
I thought
was
all kinds.
so much beyond what was on the page.
So much
It pushed us to
better,
actually go back and rewrite a lot of times just because his performance was so good.
You hide out here in the
We have a lot of people asking for close-ups of his tattoos, which I thought was kind of interesting. A lot of people want to get his tattoos, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
This fight.
I was thinking about actually getting one of his tattoos as well. So
I'm pretty sure.
what I love about this whole setup is it's the classic sort of mistaken identity. That Kratos is right to believe that it's all about him, right? Obviously, they found him, and, you know, how did they find him? But the reality is nobody that plays this ever suspects anything differently. They take in the history of what God of War was and assume bad guy showing up, all about Kratos. Goes to show you that there's always something below the surface.
I warned you.
Finally.
Finally.
I really wanted him to get knocked way back,
You would not
like so
listen.
you could see the power of Kratos, really see him belt him back. But the distance he would have to travel in the no-cut camera was so long that we ended up really making it more shallow because it was just unrealistic. That he'd be walking for like 5 minutes.
Fine. My turn.
I love the expression on people's faces when they see this for the first time, when they've been unspoiled relatively, to see Kratos get knocked over the house. Like, it's such a great, that's the surprise and delight of what this whole opening boss fight was about. You know, we talked about, oh, God of War, it's, you know, we have these huge opening moments to the fights. We have these gargantuan bosses at every game. We went bigger and bigger and bigger. We kind of got into this scale arms race with ourselves. And I said, we have to give ourselves permission on this one to not participate in the arms race anymore. We have to put a reset, you know, put a moratorium on it and focus on circumventing the expectations of the player. That the opening level by this point, you're emotionally invested. You know, if we've done our job right, you're emotionally invested, so you kind of feel like you do want to make sure this guy doesn't get in the house, doesn't get to Atreus. But then as it escalates and escalates and escalates, you're sort of taken aback. Like, really? Is it still going? Like, the feedback we kept getting, and we were still looking for the right length. So this fight was probably 3 times as long, 2 or 3 times as long as it ended up in the final game. So many different stages that we had, and we just were picking, oh, that stage is not working anymore, we'll pull that out. And it's like figuring out the duration of time you spend in each of these stages. So the first stage, really kind of getting your feet wet, and then just having him toss you up in the air and end up on here. And when you got up here, there was the free control, so you would evade and you would punch him. But I was realizing, like, it's too early for that. We just need to get right to the point of, why are there 2 beds in there? Really start selling, like, okay, he kind of got mad, and then really lets it out. And people say, oh, there's no blood in this game. No, the blood happens when it's the most purposeful point for it to happen, because it feels far more, like, jarring. This fight, the blood that happens during this fight makes it feel so much more tactile, so much more real, and a bit more shocking. But if you had blood the whole time leading up to this, it would just be, I really didn't want the button prompt to ever come up here. I wanted people to have to sit there, and Kratos was just kind of leaning against the log. But we found that people would just sit there for quite a long time before experimenting with the button. So if you sat there for a little bit, we would actually have the button prompt come up. And all of this stuff initially was meant to be playable. So this is, you know, this is what game development is. Lots of sacrifices. That the fight was so long and we just took so long to do it. But this whole thing was supposed to be Kratos throwing the punches, you kind of like responding to the punches, but just ran out of time to be able to do all of the fail states for every one of these moments, that we had to start scaling everything back, tossing things overboard. And I think in the end it actually worked really good for the pacing. Because that first moment of rage sparked by the fact that his son was put into jeopardy, and that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the game, something we even call back to at the end of the game. Less fun. I wonder what's on that mural behind them. Interesting. Nobody yet has seen that, and I think that's pretty cool. This that sort of first empowering moment of being in rage and just absolutely obliterating the stranger. Feels very good, but then you kind of get that sense that you don't get it forever. It runs out, and now you have to really focus on blocking and evading. So this whole fight is not only the setup for the journey of the game and to kind of introduce this character, but also really to stress evasion and blocking, especially at the proper time, so you're getting almost the parry. Super important in this game, and that you cannot survive this fight if you are not getting out of the way, if you are not blocking when he gets close to you. So we never ever miss an opportunity to help people understand how they need to be playing the game. Every step of the way is to introduce or reinforce these core mechanics so that we can introduce something after that. Because it takes several hours to really get you written into everything that we were trying to do in the game. I love this laugh. This again was going to be multiple punches that you could control, but cursed scope. And again, just these bits of blood all over them, really selling the violent nature of the fight, and not something you've seen up to this point, so you really it becomes more of a shock. I was surprised. I watched a bunch of streams of people playing the game, and I was surprised at how many people were like, oh, I don't think he's dead. Oh, that didn't do it. You know, if he wasn't hurt by those other things, he's fine. And they would kind of circle around the thing. So I wasn't as clever as I thought I was at that point. But eventually they were like, oh, I guess he was dead. And they all kind of, I think, got that sense of he's so tired, right? It's like he hasn't had a fight like this in a long time. You get the sense that he's older and that he's kind of shaking off the cobwebs.
When Odin sent me here, I just
This idea of they're going to be so strong, they're going to dig in so much that pressing against each other is going to split the ground, and every part of the level is going to fall off. I remember when I first talked to people about this, and there was just this idea of like, yeah, that's never going to happen. And, you know, everybody kind of made it bigger than I thought. Like, I suggested something, and I think they took it and went 1,000 steps further and just made it amazing. And our Breakables team is just astounding with the sheer volume. As I said, one of the big things about this fight is going to be the destruction of the environment. You're just going to break everything. You know, you're going to literally create a path out to go on your journey because you will split the earth open. You'll get knocked up in the air, get thrown down in the crevasse. Trees breaking everywhere, rocks shattering all over the place.
This fight is pointless. Your struggle is pointless. It didn't have to be this way.
So Kratos is just utterly covered in blood. This interesting. Everybody started their theorizing right here when he said, "I'm not like my brother." So watching people play, "Oh, not like my brother. I wonder who that is." His brother. Interestingly, nobody guessed correctly who he was. Several people were utterly convinced this was Loki, and that his brother was Thor. And I think that's partially because of, you know, just pop culture, you know, understanding of Norse mythology is we know who Thor is, we know who Loki is from Marvel. Baldur basically is just that guy who has a game, that old RPG. Playing this on the hardest difficulty is just punishing. It took me a long time. I'm not ashamed to say that I broke a controller doing it. I won't be going back and doing it again. I love how fast he moves. And even in this early phase, you can start to see that his tattoos are glowing. A little bit blue. This is the early setup for something that will happen much later in the game, when that becomes the indicator to the player of how they need to plan their strategy against it. The color of the tattoos actually being what is he invulnerable to. That snow technology is just amazing. This was shown to me really early on. Now several years ago, they had a test in a flat gray plain where they showed this snow tech, and I just lost it. I was like, this is amazing, we have to do this, where else can we do this? And I just started, I went like so many steps further than they were prepared for. I think they were just like, check it out, look what we can do. They were like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't think we can put it everywhere in the game. This is, we haven't even finished doing this yet. But I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and said, we just got to do this because it's amazing looking. This moment right here, when Kratos does the double leg lock, pull the legs back like this, it's such a weird, like very real moment that just makes this ending to the fight feel even more just real, very tactile, and a little bit, it's just shocking, you know?
I'd hope that you, of everyone I've faced, would finally.
At one point, this L3-R3 interaction was going to be removed. It was Eric Williams who finally said, I'm done cutting all this stuff. No way. I will figure out how to make this happen. We've cut way too many interactive elements of this. And I was like, you are the greatest ever. Thank you. Because, you got to finish off the fight with some kind of specific interaction. And this idea of, look, he's so tired, right? This was really important to show that after that, it took everything out of him, right? And at one point in the script, you could hear Atreus kind of sobbing a little bit off in the distance, and that was the thing that brought him back to reality, and he kind of was following that sobbing. That would lure the player back to the house. But we found we just didn't need it, right? That we could put the player in this situation where he's just really injured, and then have this internal/external monologue, which helps you understand what's going on in his head. First time he says Faye's name.
Faye, what do I do? Our son is not ready to carry your ashes to the top of the mountain.
A little health healing right there. It's a nice little subtle indicator to the certain times that he's able to will himself to heal. Which doesn't happen throughout the game. Only at the key moments we want to.
I do not know how to do this without you.
It's a great moment of vulnerability in which nobody else is around, but he's admitting how much he doesn't understand being a parent.
But we cannot stay here.
And what we shot there and what we shot here were separated by 2 years. So you can see a slight difference in the gate because we had not connected everything back together, so everything was very separated.
I thought... You're all right.
I am all right. Come. Gather your things. We are leaving.
Yep. Right there. I just showed everybody the Blades of Chaos. So, anybody who says that we're spraying anything on them, it was right there. Showing everything, all in the beginning.
Prove me wrong.
Yes, sir.
Huh. He doesn't think he heard him. Kratos thought he was being very sly by saying prove me wrong to himself, but nope. I just love this moment of being able to end that fight, come out of the house, and you see your ultimate goal off in the distance through the trees. You see the mountain right away. Like there's just a seamless connection to everything. You just finished the fight. You come out. We let you know you finished sort of the prologue of all of this, but you see the mountain off in the distance, and that's the first thing that they talk about. And now, the thing we were so scared of, we're like, well, no one's going to know that they have to go through this path right here. They're not going to get that they have to do that, but everybody, it just felt natural. Even though when it was in gray sheet, it felt ridiculous. So it's interesting how much art and the sense of place and really good lighting can all just kind of help sell something that without the context is perhaps a little bit ludicrous. I can acknowledge that.
Did you kill him?
And I love this moment. This is the first moment that he jumps on his back, and watching people when they're streaming and have that like, oh, that's so cute, right? It becomes something you just do throughout the rest of the game. But I never realized how interesting of a moment it is the first time you experience it.
Could have died. Never leave me alone again. All right?
All right.
All right, so we're here at Tyr's Vault. This is the right after you've gotten the chisel from the stonemason's level. Now you're stepping in to see how to head down to Tyr's Vault and get the black runestone.
Wow. Can't believe we're setting foot in Tyr's vault. Another one of these.
So this is the little introduction to something you're going to find out later.
Wait.
Adding a bit of mystery. That there's a missing panel. What does this
He was
mean?
loved by everyone, including the giants. Other than me, he was the only one they gifted with their special sight.
It's wonderful to actually have the time in this experience to be able to set things up that aren't even relevant for 8 hours, 9 hours. This is a really great moment right here.
Actually, come look. Let me show you how to.
The tables have turned, and his son is going to teach him something.
So much. Let me teach you something.
This is definitely taken from when my son would point in the storybooks and
Atreus.
have my wife read in Swedish, and he kind of look at me and, come on, old man, learn.
I know how to read.
I know how to read,
Just not this
except he
song.
has other people read
You're
for
halfway
him.
there already then. Okay. So the runes represent a lot of different things. Some gods, some animals.
And this whole scene wasn't originally in the game.
Sorry.
Not that.
We had changed a few structural points and lost a few areas and needed to fix a problem. And it turned out that this fix, to me, created one of the most powerful moments in the whole game. So I will always
Rain?
be open to these kinds of changes and understand that everything happens for a reason. This whole scene is just incredible.
But now, everyone's gonna think
Nolan. Nolan North, man. He is just amazing.
I kill you. No one's gonna
Has a little bit of that like Emperor with Luke.
Are you dumb?
But this sort of realization, this kind of
Or did you get it from your
Atreus'
mom?
moment
She's
to really show his family colors, you know, this idea that he is truly Kratos' son. But he's definitely not ready, right? He's never been told that he's a god. So his body is still fighting all of this stuff. And that classic, like, Kratos rage pose coming out. It's just... So if you remember in the beginning of the game, rage mode was triggered the first time when Baldur actually threatened the boy. Like, I'm going to go find out who you have hiding in that house. Kratos goes into rage mode. When his father's in danger, Atreus instinctively goes into rage mode. But he's just not able to do that. So then that fuels Kratos' rage mode even more. And it just has this great kind of mirrored dynamic, you know, that how far Atreus has come, but how far he has to go. Oh. Something I don't know if people pick up on, but he stays in his rage mode until he actually picks his son up. So that he hasn't been able to calm himself down, and it is actually picking his son up. That's the thing that calms him. That puts the fires out. He's worried about him, but actually making the physical contact, the thing that was so hard for him throughout the game, that's what calms him down. It's the sort of knowing that he's able to do something. And now this, we had to write a special sort of navigation for Kratos. At one point it was just on a spline, and it just felt awkward and weird. And G-Troff was able to kind of really dig in and figure out a way to make it a bit more smooth. And when you come out here, the world has changed. You know, the red storm, as we're calling it, which is the epicenter right over their house, is off in the distance, and you kind of have this weird, almost bluish gray haze everywhere. It's the world is reacting to this imbalance. The world is reacting to Loki being near death, right? And at this time, you don't know he's Loki. Spoilers! And at one point, my initial pitch for this was going to be the only time Kratos was going to be brave. This was where he was going to actually tell Atreus everything. He was going to unload it all, because he had a captive audience who actually wasn't going to judge him or speak back. But then Mimir was there, so I realized, like, you know what, I don't think this is very good. And the writers kind of pushed back on this one, and they were right. This was the time to be silent. This was the time to force the player to look at the unconscious body of Atreus, you know, and have a little bit of conversation from Mimir.
Freya's forest is a blind spot for him. This is our smartest move. And if anyone can heal him, it's her.
And it was very intentional to draw this out. From the beginning, I wanted this sequence to have that little itch in the back of your head to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then when you get to Freya, when you start thinking, wait a minute, did he just say, am I going where I think he says he's going? Oh, wait, is that happening? And then you just build up that anticipation. And I felt very strongly that we could carry this to 15 or 20 minutes and really build it up to appreciate the crescendo of that moment to actually get the blades. A lot of people had said, you know, let's just fast travel. This takes too long. It's boring. And, you know, at the time, they were right. It's just gray box. And, you know, it did take a long time to boat, and there was nothing to look at. There was no music. It was very aggravating. And I think it, you know, is a testament to their faith that I kept saying, no, we are not doing that. I love this little extra animation that they did. Just resetting Atreus, his head just collapsing on his shoulders. And then resetting here. And now you're forced to just look at like he is doing everything he can to steal himself.
Somebody just called the
like he is not an effusive, you know, emoter. But this right here, this kind of, he can't fight this. He can't stab it. He can't defeat it. He simply has to figure out the logical, smart move out of this. And the emotions that he's trying to suppress right here because of what he's grown up. The way he's grown up is just, you know, he's like a caged animal at this point. He doesn't know how to deal with it. It was awesome that we were able to get a lot of that across. Like, it's so intentional that every step, you know, we're not letting you sprint. We're putting you in this walk, and we're forcing you to deal with this. There's potentially, we had hoped, a tiny bit of agitation from the player, and that agitation is desired. We want you to feel tense, right, and feel a little bit like Kratos.
Open the door! We need your
I love
help.
her line response.
Woman, do you hear me? It is urgent!
I'm still a god. Go away.
The boy has fallen ill! Freya!
Oh, I love her character. It's so good. This was an early on scene too. We shot this when we didn't have everything fully worked out as far as the spaces, and then had to reshoot a little bit to ensure that we got everything correct. But they were utter professionals in this sequence and nailed the performance. Sunny, excellent at being passed out.
This to him. Will you help me?
One thing that everybody was worried about was the fact that you could switch armors, so that in every animation or every cinematic, you could have all these different armor pieces, and they felt it was going to be distracting. But I personally thought it was great, that it felt like when I see that in the game, when I actually play a game and I've made all these choices and then I'm in these story moments and I see the choices reflected on my character, it's awesome. That's part of the magic of games.
9 realms can create a blaze. As for the dead, your frost axe will be useless. You'll need to find something else.
Then I must return home. Dig up a past I swore would stay buried.
It's interesting because everybody has secrets, right? She's advising him, care about your son, focus on him, don't worry about the secrets of the past. But I mean, she doesn't go anywhere without her sword. She can't draw it. She can't use it. Odin has prevented that, but she still maintains the veneer, the secret. It's like everybody's got something that they're hiding.
Boy.
Himalay, you must hurry. Through my garden, there's a path leading to my boat. Take it. Return home. Dig up your past. Do whatever you need.
And what's interesting, she's wearing a necklace that actually says Balder in runes. So early on when you meet her, if somebody is eagle-eyed and they make a screenshot, they're actually going to be able to see that. We had a physical necklace for the Witch of the Woods made for PSX, and we were all so busy, we didn't realize that the necklace said Balder on it until we were standing looking at it at PSX and realizing if somebody takes a photo of this and goes home and translates it, they're going to see that the witch's necklace says Balder. And nobody noticed. It was like Kojima wearing the Death Stranding shirt before he announced Death Stranding. Super meta, and nobody caught on. I was very thankful for that, because that was a big mess up on my part. So now this is another one where at this point people were like, all right, it's been, you know, we did a cinematic, we did all these other things. Maybe we should just warp him there? I'm like, no. This boat ride is so important for his development.
Do what I must. Leave me be.
And it was like, you take Freya's magical boat, and the boat just knows where to go. It takes you off, and the storm begins. And as you're getting closer, you've already seen the indications of the red storm, and now you're going to go into the heart of the storm, right? And this is to really represent what's going on inside of Kratos. This is a physical, external representation of the storm that has been going on inside of him forever, right? And this moment, everything about this moment is about a pivotal character shift for Kratos. His entire life, the entirety of the 7 games that he's been in previously has been spent blaming other people for his problems, taking almost no responsibility for anything that he's done. In fact, the only acknowledgement of it is saying, I will do things for you if you erase the horrible things that I've done, the stupid decisions that I've made, which only further served to bond him in servitude to the gods. Like, his inability to accept and take responsibility is the weight that has held him down for so long. And that little smug smile from Athena, too. He knows what he has to do, and it's like, I don't think he's ready even now. Like, in this moment for me, he's still 80-90% the way there. He hasn't fully gotten there. And it isn't until she taunts him that he really realizes what he is, who he is, and that the only way he is ever going to move forward is if he simply accepts his faults. Right? I mean, that's for all of us. That's the biggest thing, is instead of denying our faults, instead of pretending they don't exist, is kind of accepting it and desiring to either change or simply live with these things that we don't like about ourselves. There was a whole plan to have full sequences of Hellwalkers fighting other creatures. There's a great Hellwalker up on the cliff just looking down at you. It's kind of creepy. Saying nothing, doing nothing, just staring right at you. And there was going to be, you know, animals and creatures running around everywhere, and just we ran out of budget and time. But I think it's actually better. Again, that's another one of those things where the limitations made it better. It wasn't overwhelming. You're taking all this in. It is the moments of quiet, right? Which is very rare for him. That he's doing nothing. He can't do anything but sit and wait for this boat to deliver him to the front of his house. It's a nice little, you know, sort of callback to the beginning of the game, when he and his son were coming in the same path at a very different meeting. And at the beginning of the game, when you're about to set off on the journey, we do a little pause of the camera and look underneath the house to acknowledge that the blades are there underneath the house. It's a little bit of a hint, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't notice it. But, you know, anytime we're going to have a reveal like this, a little surprise, I always want to have a couple of opportunities to show that, hey, that might be coming, and if you're really paying attention. And this whole idea is kind of the throwback to classic God of War, where every time you would get a new weapon, magical power, any sort of new mechanic, we would give you the before and after. We'd give you the opportunity to experience before you had it, fighting a wave of enemies, and then after you got it, we would throw a bunch of enemies at you so you could really see, like, wow, that's changed. The way I interact with characters is so different. So this also shows you that these enemies are fairly impervious to the axe, so trying to use the axe directly on them causes it to bounce off, and the duration of time it takes to take them out is much higher. When you get the blades and come back out, you just, you know, hot knife through through butter, right? It's just absolutely easy. I really like when Mimir gives you directions on where the enemies are. There was a point in the game where Mimir was not going to be hanging from the belt. He was going to be in a bag because everybody thought it would be silly. Or not everybody, but many people thought it'd be silly if there was a head hanging off the belt. And I kind of had to use a little bit of inception and some social engineering over time to get people comfortable with the idea that, hey, he's going to be hanging on the belt and he's going to be talking the whole time. They said, I worry that's going to get annoying. And I was like, no, if we cast this guy right, if we write him right, it's going to be great. It'll be unusual, it'll be different. It won't feel exactly like previous God of Wars, but it'll have that kind of interesting dynamic that I think great sort of fantasy films have had. And this is just no different. This was a really, really emotional scene for Chris. I didn't know at the time how dark it was going to be, so we really couldn't see a lot of what he was doing, but I mean, you can feel it in what he's saying. He went to a really dark place to get here, and I just have been so in awe of his performance throughout this entire thing. But this moment, I just go up and give him a hug after one of the takes, because I asked him to do it like 4 times. We had to pull a little trick where whatever armor you have on, we have to kind of turn it off at certain points so that we can get some of these. There's a few scenes where we have to do that. Breaks a little bit of the reality. You know, if you're paying really close attention, it's a little weird, but most people we found through the playtest did not notice it. Although finally, because the resolution's a lot higher on the PlayStation 4, everybody notices the whole, there's chains on it, and then he puts it on his back, and then the chains aren't connected to his hands, which was part of the franchise from the beginning, the kind of magical, like, they're connected to his arm, then he puts them on his back, and they're not connected to his arm anymore. It was a weird sort of break of the illusion, I think, for everybody. Oh. And this is Carol Rougier as Athena, the original Athena. I love her performance, her voice. She is wonderful. There it is, the father. That's the one that gets him. It's the one thing he cares about. That's where he realizes he is a monster.
You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
Such an empowering moment. That feeling of like, you haven't shed everything from the past, but at least you've accepted it. You've accepted that you are imperfect. And you've done a lot of bad stuff, and that begins the path for real change for him. Obviously, he goes and kills a bunch of creatures right after that, but from a gameplay perspective, this puts you into that moment of like, alright, that is the classic heroic moment. You know, the indie putting the whip on. And I feel like reaching this point was satisfying because of the journey that it took to get there. It needed to take 15 to 20 minutes. If we had rushed it to get there, I feel like most people wouldn't have really absorbed what was happening. Part of it is this sort of building of the tension and that disbelief. I mean, you want it to be long enough that you're like, oh, they're probably not doing that. No way, they're doing that. And this is a testament to every single member of the team bringing something to the table to realize this long moment. I mean, we called these, key level beats. That was our development name, and we had tons of these key level beats throughout, and there was these little strike teams that we would put together to try to realize each one of them. And some of them were easier than others, but this one, I think, presented an incredible challenge because it required so many people to come together and come up with, unorthodox solutions, or time-consuming solutions to try to realize it to its fullest extent. It was a sight to behold to go from the really crude, blocked-out version to actually get to the point where even members of our own team, when they were playing it for the first time, were just like giddy, right? Which reminded me, in this moment, to see some of the team members excited when I was on the show floor in E3 2004, maybe, when we had a demo of God of War 1, and I was watching people come up to the station, pick it up, and just start cutting through a bunch of skellies and just having an amazing, amazing time. It was nice to actually see that from members of our own team. This is where you realize there was a hidden gateway in your front yard the whole time, covered in vines, these Helheim vines that actually are preventing you from accessing it. So without the blades, you would have never been able to open this magical door. So I think that's just so cool. Well, there you have it. A little glimpse behind the scenes. Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you everybody for playing.
PlayStation